Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. The lie began on a Tuesday morning, casual as a weather report. She sat at the table in her navy blazer, suitcase propped by the door, sipping coffee like any other workday. "They want me in Chicago for 3 days," she said, scrolling through her phone as if she were reading an email from her manager. "Big meetings, networking dinners, I'll be back Friday night." Something about the way she said it stuck in my chest. Not the words themselves, but the performance. My wife had always been meticulous about travel, sending me her itineraries, forwarding confirmations, even texting me photos from airports. But this time, nothing. Just a vague Chicago for 3 days. I smiled and said, "Good luck," the way any husband would. But as soon as she left, rolling her suitcase down the driveway, my mind churned. I stared at the untouched mug she left behind and felt the silence thicken around me. At lunch, I called her office. The receptionist knew me by name. We'd been to company dinners together, exchanged small talk. When I asked if my wife had arrived safely in Chicago, the woman paused. "Conference?" she said. "There's no trip scheduled this week. Everyone's here." The words hit harder than any punch. I thanked her quietly, hung up, and sat frozen with the phone pressed against my ear. My chest felt hollow, my pulse uneven. There it was. Confirmation that the story wasn't just a lie. It was deliberate, premeditated, bold. That evening, instead of going home, I drove to the airport. The terminal buzzed with life. Families hugging. Business travelers typing furiously. Announcements blaring overhead. I scanned the crowd, heart pounding, searching for a face I both dreaded and needed to see. And then she appeared. Hair styled perfectly, suitcase rolling behind her, her pace confident. She wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, tall, tailored suit, the kind of presence that drew eyes without effort. He leaned close, said something that made her laugh softly. The laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. She touched his arm, light but deliberate, the kind of touch that says, "We're not strangers, we're something else." My stomach twisted. I wanted to shout her name, to demand answers, to make a scene that would echo through the terminal. But instead, I stood still, rooted in silence. My fingers dug into my pockets until my nails bit skin. I watched as they checked in together, as he guided her with a hand on her back, as if she belonged to him now. They disappeared through security, her boarding pass held in the same hand that used to hold mine. I didn't follow. There was nothing left for me in that gate area. Instead, I turned and walked to the parking garage, every step heavier than the last. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel and let the truth settle. She hadn't just lied. She had planned to erase me, at least for 3 days, maybe longer. The trip wasn't about business. It was about replacing me in a way that felt cleaner to her. A trial run for a life where I didn't exist, but she had underestimated me. She thought I'd sit at home, waiting, oblivious. She thought her performance was flawless. She hadn't counted on my instincts, or my patience. By the time I drove out of the airport, I knew what I had to do. Rage would only give her power. Screaming would only give her excuses. But silence, documentation, preparation, those would be the blades she'd never see until they were pressed against her plan. That night, I didn't go home. I booked a last-minute meeting with a lawyer downtown. He listened as I laid everything out. The phone call to her office, the trip to the airport, the stranger in the suit. He asked for evidence, and I pulled out my phone. Photos. Time-stamped. Her hand on his arm. His suitcase beside hers. Proof in pixels. He nodded slowly. "We can work with this," he said. "We'll move quietly. You protect your assets. I'll prepare the filings. When she comes back, the world she left won't be the one she returns to." For the first time that day, I exhaled. The knot in my chest loosened, not because the pain was gone, but because I finally had a plan. While she enjoyed her business trip, clinking glasses with a man she called her future, I would be dismantling her present. Every account, every signature, every piece of ground she thought was hers. I would secure it all. And when she landed back home, rolling her suitcase into the house with rehearsed smiles and fabricated stories, she wouldn't find the husband she thought she could manipulate. she'd find silence, proof, and doors locked tighter than she ever imagined. That was the moment I understood revenge wasn't about rage. It was about patience. She thought she was running away with freedom in her hands. She didn't realize she was boarding a plane to the ruins of her own life. The house felt hollow without her suitcase in the corner, or her perfume drifting through the halls, but I didn't mind. Empty space is easier to fill than poisoned air. While she played out her business trip, I filled the silence with preparation. Every morning began at the bank, every afternoon at my lawyer's office, every evening at my desk in the study with a folder that grew thicker each day. The banker must have sensed the weight behind my calm voice. When I asked about transferring our joint funds into an account under my sole control, she looked at me carefully. Protection, I explained. She nodded and began the paperwork without judgment. Direct deposits rerouted. Automatic payments shifted. Alerts enabled. By the time I left, her cards had spending limits that would trap her the moment she tried to use them. My lawyer was sharper than any blade. He had me sign documents I didn't fully understand, but trusted. He grinned once and said, "She'll come back to a castle with no keys." I believed him. For once, the ground felt steady beneath me. That night, while she texted me photos of airport lounges and conference tables, stock images downloaded from the internet, I later discovered, I sat with my notebook writing dates and times. Her lies had rhythm and I was learning the beat. The second night, my phone buzzed again. "Dinner with the team, late night. Don't wait up. Love you." I almost laughed. I had seen her board the plane with him. I had watched her hand brush his arm. If that was the team, then honesty had a new definition. Still, I didn't reply. Silence was sharper than sarcasm. On the third day, the first crack appeared. My phone buzzed with a bank alert, attempted transfer $4,500 from joint checking to a newly created account. Status, denied. A wave of satisfaction spread through me. I pictured her in some hotel room, frustrated, maybe even panicked, as her business trip slipped into inconvenience. She would try again. I wanted her to. The deeper she dug, the easier it would be to bury her plan under its own weight. By the time her plane touched back down, my fortress was nearly complete. The house was the same, but I wasn't. She rolled her suitcase into the hallway, her voice sugary sweet. "I missed you," she said, leaning in for a kiss she didn't mean. I let her lips brush my cheek but didn't return it. "Conference go well?" I asked evenly. "Exhausting," she sighed, "but worth it. Big opportunities ahead." She moved toward the kitchen, narrating her rehearsed details. Banquets, panels, long meetings with executives. I watched her pour wine, her hand steady, her story smooth. She had practiced this, maybe even in the mirror. I nodded at the right times, offering no challenge. She mistook my quiet for belief. That was the beauty of patience, letting the liar tighten their own rope. Over the next week she returned to her routines, late nights, secretive texts, extra care with her appearance. But the cracks widened. Another transfer attempt failed. This time $6,800, a declined card at a boutique she loved. Each alert lit my phone like a reminder. You're winning, without even moving. Her temper sharpened in subtle ways. She slammed cabinets. She sighed loudly when I didn't ask about her projects. She accused me of being distracted, of not listening. I wanted to laugh. If only she knew how closely I was listening. Just not to her words, but to her patterns. The moment that sealed it came on a Sunday afternoon. She announced she was going out with friends, dressed in a skirt she hadn't worn in years. I watched her leave, then followed at a distance. Sure enough, she didn't meet friends. She met him. At a cafe across town, their heads bent together, his hand covering hers on the table. I snapped the photo from across the street. Clear. Undeniable. Time-stamped. It wasn't anger I felt, it was clarity, sharp as glass. My folder was complete now. Proof of lies, of betrayal, of financial manipulation. Enough to strip away her story until only the truth remained. When I returned home, I placed the photo on top of the folder and slid it into the safe. My lawyer would see it next. And when the time came, she wouldn't just face me. She'd face her own reflection in front of everyone who mattered. I didn't end it that night. That would have been too easy. I waited, letting her think her game was still under control. Because the sweetest revenge isn't catching them in the act. It's letting them write the script of their downfall, word by word, until the curtain falls on their own betrayal. And I knew exactly when the curtain would fall. The photograph from the cafe sat on top of the folder in my safe like a signature. The final piece of her confession written in daylight. Every time I looked at it, I felt the same calm I'd carried since the airport. Betrayal used to burn in my chest. Now it sat cold, steady, and manageable. I wasn't angry anymore. I was prepared. I didn't confront her that night, or the next. Letting her think she was in control gave me power. She still slipped her phone face down on the counter, still spun stories about strategy sessions and late calls with Chicago, still kissed my cheek like a politician posing for cameras, and I let her. I smiled, I nodded, I played the role of the trusting husband because it made her bolder, more careless. But while she rehearsed lies, I rehearsed timing. My lawyer and I met twice more, finalizing documents, building the structure that would collapse her plans. When she tries to file, he said, she'll discover she's already too late. I agreed. Revenge wasn't about catching her. It was about letting her walk into her own trap. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, she sat across from me at dinner, her eyes bright in a way that wasn't for me. "I've been thinking," she said carefully. "Maybe we should consider separating. I don't want this to feel ugly. We can do it fairly. I just need access to our savings to get started." I cut my steak slowly, laid down the knife, and looked at her. "Fairly," I repeated. "Yes," she said quickly, eager, leaning forward. "You know me. I'm not out to hurt you. I just need to move forward. It'll be better for both of us." I almost laughed, not out of humor but out of awe at her performance. She still thought she was running the show. She still thought I was the blind man in the audience. I reached into my pocket and slid an envelope across the table. She frowned, opened it, and pulled out a copy of the photo from the cafe. Her face drained of color. "I already know," I said softly. "I knew at the airport. I knew every time you tried to move money. I know his name. I know the dates. I know everything." She tried to speak, but words stuck in her throat. Her hands trembled as she shoved the photo back into the envelope. How could you?" "I protected myself," I interrupted. "That's what you never counted on." Her voice rose. "This doesn't mean anything. He's just—" "Stop," I said. My tone was calm, steady, final. "You don't need to explain. You need to understand. Every account you tried to touch is locked. Every card you tried to use is frozen. The house, mine, the business, untouchable. You left for 3 days thinking you'd come back to an easy escape. You came back to find the door closed." Tears filled her eyes, but I saw no regret, only panic. She had gambled and lost, and now the reality was crashing down. "You can't just leave me with nothing," she whispered. "You left me with nothing the moment you bought that plane ticket," I replied. For the next hour, the house echoed with her pleas, her excuses, her anger. I stayed silent through most of it. There was nothing left to say. The woman across from me wasn't my wife anymore. She was a stranger who had used my name, my trust, my resources to build a fantasy. Now the fantasy was gone. Days later, she tried one last move. She called her lawyer, hoping to get ahead of me, hoping to file first. But when she walked into his office, she discovered he already had a folder waiting for her, mine. My lawyer had shared every piece of proof, every transfer attempt, every photo, every lie. Her own attorney advised her to settle quietly or risk walking out of court with less than nothing. The news spread quietly through her workplace. People noticed she no longer mentioned conferences. Her boss stopped inviting her to client dinners. A rumor reached me through a colleague. She'd been passed over for a promotion she once bragged about. "Trust issues," someone whispered. Even if they didn't know the details, they knew enough. Meanwhile, my life steadied. The business thrived. Friends who had seen the party fiasco respected my silence more than any outburst. My lawyer called it textbook execution. I called it survival. One evening, months after she moved out, she appeared at my workshop door. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair pulled back hastily, her eyes empty of the confidence she once wore like armor. "I lost everything," she admitted quietly. "I thought he loved me. I thought I had a plan. I was wrong." I put down my chisel, wiped sawdust from my hands, and looked at her. For the first time in years, I felt absolutely nothing, no anger, no longing, just distance. You said you wanted to move forward, I reminded her. Now you can. Her lip trembled. She opened her mouth, searching for one more plea. But I had already turned back to my work. The door closed behind her with a soft click. That was the last time I saw her. Sometimes, late at night, I take out the photo from the cafe, the one that sealed her downfall. Not to relive the pain, but to remind myself what silence can do. Rage burns fast. Patience builds a fortress. She boarded a plane thinking she was flying toward freedom. She didn't realize she was flying straight into the ruins of her own life. And I didn't even have to lift a hand. I just let her destroy herself. Months passed after her so-called business trip disaster, and life had finally found its rhythm again. My lawyer's filings stood like iron gates around everything I owned. The house was quiet but peaceful, the kind of silence that didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Every now and then, a mutual acquaintance would mention her name in passing. She was renting a small apartment, working part-time jobs, drifting in and out of places where no one really trusted her anymore. One evening, an envelope slid under my door. No return address, just my name in handwriting I knew too well. Inside was a letter, pages of apologies, pages of explanations. She wrote about how the man she left with had cut ties the moment her accounts froze, how her so-called friends stopped calling, how her family looked at her with quiet disappointment. She begged for another chance, not at love, but at respect, at redemption. I folded the letter once, slid it into the same folder that held her flight photos and bank alerts, and locked it away. She had written her betrayal with her actions. This letter was just an epilogue, not a rewrite. Instead of replying, I built forward. I put more energy into my business, expanded into a new workshop, and began speaking at small seminars about resilience, never mentioning her, but always weaving the lesson. Protect what matters, and trust actions more than words. People listened. Some nodded with the recognition of their own scars. Her downfall didn't need another strike from me. Life had done the work. My revenge was already complete, not in a dramatic finale, but in the simple fact that she lived every day with the consequences of her choices, while I lived free. And as I locked the shop that night, moonlight spilling across the wood grain on my latest project, I realized I no longer carried her in my chest. Just a memory, locked in a folder, replaced by peace.